So welcome to another episode of The Actor's Perspective. Today we're going to be talking about Titanic by Christopher Durang. And of course, starting off as always, my first question to you all is: what are your initial thoughts on the play?
This would definitely be a play that I would love to do. Like, I think there's a challenge in it for an actor. Like, as an actor, just reading it, I was like, oh, this would be like such a killer uh, performance to like try to give. It would be such a cool challenge. Not just the fact that you need to hold in your laughter a lot of the time, but the fact that like you have someone who had to play Lydia essentially be very three different people, and it still somehow made sense to the other characters, like seeing her as those different people. And the script has so many layers in it, and you can really get confused. But I definitely think as an actor, it would be such a cool challenge.
My first thoughts are like, what a wackadoodle play. And I think my favorite, or one of my favorite parts, is how when the captain is speaking and pokes fun directly at it and is like, I don't understand every movie I've ever seen. And it's like, yeah, no one understands what's happening during this or why. And like, so it's like in that part of the play where they literally laugh at themselves, like Durang laughs at himself, like, stop trying to, and in the note from the author, just so many times saying like, stop trying to overanalyze it. It's just weird.
And it's subtle too, right? Like, it's not like for an audience member, it would take a minute to like for it to click that he's actually talking about the play, how nonsensical it is. It's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think this play is very much for people. It's like, you know how like they always say like, oh, it's common sense, but common sense isn't common. It's for the people who have actual common sense.
I'll be honest, it's not my favorite of his plays, and I think part of that is I always have a problem when, for example, in this play, Durang does have a big note about how the play is supposed to be done. And sometimes I find that frustrating from a playwright, because if I can't understand how your play is supposed to be done in the writing, I sometimes feel like you haven't quite done your job as a playwright.
But I
Mm.
but I think with that, it's hard with comedy in general sometimes for actors. And when it's such an absurd thing, like anyone, I'm just going to use my always example of Schitt's Creek. If any other actress had
Oh
tried
shit.
to play Moira like Catherine O'Hara did, it could have been so bad. But because she was so committed and sincere to her absurdity as a person and really believed it, it's hilarious. And I think that's what the note is more in the play. It's like, don't overanalyze, be sincere, and don't make it campy. Don't just be like, oh, I'm crazy, because that's not what it is.
That was
Yeah.
really good.
Right, and I agree with that. I think for me as an actor, as a director, I have a range of what I can do with your work, and if I do it wrong, that's then on me, sure. But if you can't make your work clear, sometimes I feel like that is a failure as a playwright, because you have so much control. If you want the play to be seen a certain way, then you need to have it written that way.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with both of you in that, this reminds me of what was that other play that we read, like Almost Maine or whatever, where
Yeah.
Everyone just agreed with this exact point.
well, I have to bring that up, but that one, I feel like that one's terrible because it tells you like line by line how you should read it, and that's where like, okay, sure, just be the director. Whereas I think here, at least there's a like, hey, this is the style I'm going for, and I think you can play with that a lot, which was a point that was made last time. But also, like, I do take issue with like him, like specifically, like in here, like he may as well just like give us line readings, like, oh, and here, like with this scene, play it this way, and with
Well,
this
he
scene,
kind
play
of
it
did,
that
didn't
way.
he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he basically did. And it's like, okay, I mean, maybe that could be kind of like the precious writer and him not being able to like let go, because I think it'd be interesting to see, it's these 4 or 5-ish characters who have really wild and disparate personalities. Like, what if one does play it super real and the others don't? Like, what if one and like that mix and match, like who knows what kind of interesting things, who knows what kind of interesting things could be could kind of like showcase themselves in that performance.
I did not like it. Like, I did not like this show. Not at all. But I will say, and I could get into my reasons for not liking it as we go on, like with follow-up questions and such. But but the question of like how you should play it, and like how much control should the playwright have over that, and how strict should that control be? I don't know. I kind of Ethan, I kind of agree with you a little bit. Like, if you need to keep talking it up, and if you need to really put all these parameters down for no, they're not gonna get it. You're gonna screw it up if you play it this way. I don't know. Maybe you need to do a better job writing it, but that's just how I feel. It's my opinion.
Oh, that's fair.
Indeed.
Chris, I saw your hand.
Yes, I was gonna say I 100% agree with Anais, and it's because, well, for me, I read it because I read everything like with no like tone or like context, like how you read a text message. Like, I don't want to place anything on that, so I was reading it in such a way, and then I didn't like it until I started hearing everyone else, and then like them doing their inflections, and then so now like when I'm reading like my sentences, and like I'm just like, oh, I didn't read it like this before. I was like, oh, I should react like this to this because it was so, I don't know. It's like, to me, in any way, it's shaped like, it's shaped formlessly. I should say, like.
Go ahead.
So I mean, like, I get what you guys are saying, but I'm an advocate for like, listen, if the writer wants to add in these notes of like, let me help you further understand where I'm coming from, I'm an advocate for that, because I'm like, give me as much help as possible, please. And I think with this kind of play, it's a good example of that, because there's so many different types of comedy. There's so many different layers to comedy. There's so many ways to play comedy, and I think I personally appreciated the note, because the role of Lydia, I definitely would have played that up. Like, I would have been way campy, very like, hamsters in my vagina. Like, I definitely would have gone completely.
She wanted to do that. She wanted to do it like that.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think maybe it's more of like, in certain circumstances it's necessary, and I thought with this particular play, because it was a specific type of comedy that he was going for, and I don't know how else he would have been able to add that into the stage directions or whatever have you. I think the note was
It could
needed.
easily flip if somebody played it like super serious and realist. Like, if everyone did it, it would turn into like some weird dystopian nightmare version, like very dramatic, and like, oh, there's people sleeping with their fathers and weird, and it could go really south really quick, versus like having the balance, like he says, between not being too campy but not taking it seriously.
Yeah. So actually, a lot of that stuff that Shia was mentioning about being absurd and all actually brings me to one of the other questions, which is, there is an extreme level of absurdity in this play. And so I just want to ask you guys, like, do you all think it was successful? Like, for me, there were definitely some things that worked. Like, I love the idea that all of the hitting the iceberg was false flags of like, it was, the recorder in going over the speakers, and so it never actually happened. And then there were some aspects that I will be honest don't work for me. I think part of that is the age of the play, and part of that is the things like the relationship with Teddy and Richard, and the relationship of Lydia and Annabella and Harriet with the rest of the characters. I think there's a lot in there that doesn't quite resonate, but it definitely lends itself to the absurd. So what do you all think about that?
Much of this play, and even from his note, the first thing I got was just like, maybe you need to have a certain cup of tea. Like, this has to be your type of comedy. You have to really get it. I think he was just writing it for himself. Clearly, he was writing it for himself. And either it's a hit or it's gonna be a hit or miss for some people.
Yeah, I think I like it more from a performer's point of view, similar to kind of like having similar feelings as Andre, than an audience's point of view. I think if I watched the play performed, I'd be like, all right, yeah, cool, you're edgy. But from the performer's point of view, it is that challenge of like, hey, can I, sell this, weird many incestual moments between, Teddy and his father, or like, I guess not father, because it's not really his father kind of thing. And it kind of reminds me of this comedian Bill Burr. Like, he famously would, I don't think he does this anymore, but, or maybe actually he kind of does, where he would like intentionally try to inflame the audience just for the challenge of, hey, can I reel them back in? Can I like get them back on my side? And that is very much kind of like, a comedian's punishment to himself. And like, I think that's where I would find the joy of it, but probably watching it, yeah, not my thing.
I just want to add in a thing. I completely agree with both Andre and Josue. Like, it's, yeah, like if I were sitting in the audience, I would be both bored and a little like ticked off that someone had brought me there. Like, I'm just like, as a totally audience perspective. Yeah, this is not a play I would necessarily go see, but yeah, like even in the reading, yeah, it was a little bit, it was a fun little challenge to kind of walk that razor's edge of like absurdity versus sincerity, and both and neither, and it was fun. But it's not a, it's just, it's, I would say that it is, in terms of cups of tea, I would say it is definitely my cup of tea to try to perform, not so much my cup of tea it's that I would, enjoy watching.
Yeah.
As the point that has been made already.
That's it. Amanda.
Yeah, I just want to pose the question of, given the absurdity and the cup of tea that we keep saying, I think, what about Family Guy and South Park and Rick and Morty that are very popular but really off the rails sometimes? Like, is this in a way the stage's version of that absurd humor, where there's like all of a sudden Mr. Hanky is a piece of Christmas poo and people were obsessed with it? You know what I mean? Like that sort of humor where it's just like, yep, he's got a dildo on his head, deal with it. Like, it's that sort of absurd thing. And so how do you think about that comparison with that?
All right, 1,000% agree. Oh, I'm sorry, you weren't talking to me.
Oh, I'm done.
No, yeah. Anybody who wants to chime in? I saw Josue, you kind of popped your hand up.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I love that question. Like, full disclosure, don't like Family Guy, don't like South Park, love Rick and Morty. Because I think
Of course.
I know. It's, I think, a lot smarter, and the jokes are there. I think, Rick and Morty's creator probably wouldn't be like, hey, this is how you should read this joke, or this is how you should get these lines. Like, the intent is very, very clear. Whereas, and it can be gross, it can be absurd, it can be, a toe or past that line of comfort. Whereas I think with Durang, by his own admission, he's like, hey, this can get misconstrued. Like, this can get, this can be read the wrong way. And I think I wonder if that's kind of why we're having that reaction. Whereas I think with Rick and Morty, it's like, oh, that's gross comedy, that's gross humor, but you are aware that it's humor. Whereas with Durang, like that was one thing that I was like, it's not that funny. Like it was like, I'm not seeing like, it's like, okay, yeah, he's having sex with his used to be dad, and it's like, okay. And like I think honestly, like that's my reaction to like South Park and Family Guy too, where it's like you're so over the top, where it's like you're boring because you're trying so hard.
I think that's fair, and I think you're right in that, you know, as we've all said, there's a level of absurdity that we're okay with. There's a level of like raunchiness that he sometimes toes the line with in this, and I do wonder if maybe if he didn't have that note, how would you play it as an actor without that information? Because I do think if I'm reading this for the first time as a performer, I agree with a lot of you guys, which actually leads into the next question of like, as a performer, how do you approach this? Because for me, I definitely would try to take it to an absurd level, because I would read this and be like, well, there's no other way to approach this, right? And it seems like Durang's kind of asking you as a performer to pull back, but I would just wonder, we all kind of touched on it, like, as a performer, how would you approach a role in this play?
I think, as I mentioned before, like the key to comedy is that it's rooted in truth. And that doesn't mean that it has to be hyper realistic truth, but you really have to believe the world that you're living in. And trust, like, you know, the captain has a dildo on his head for most of the play, but he's not like, I'm wacky and have a dildo on my head, or like commenting on it. Like he just accepts he likes the dildo on his head and that's why he wears it, you know. Like it's a very sincere behavior. So I think as an actor, you could, it as exercise, like obviously go to the campy and see how big those moments can be, but then reel it back in to be like, why were they doing that? Or like, not why, like psychologically, why does he like a dildo on his head? That's a whole other thing. But like reeling it back in to make it like honest, like I'm wacky and I have this on my head, and like over the top, and then just being like, I like this hat. This is a good hat. And like moving on from it, you know, like going one extreme and then reeling it back in so that it's rooted in truth, even though the truth is insane.
It's definitely because after we finished reading it, I was actually talking to Anja. I was like, I would definitely need a few weeks with this script going over and over again and trying to figure out different ways of approaching it, but still trying to keep it as sincere as possible. Because like Amanda said, with comedy, there is a truth in the reality that you're in, and that's part of the comedy as well. So I agree with what Amanda's saying. I definitely would take time with this script and go over. Like I was like, Andre, the part that I was breaking so much while we were reading is when Annabella is having her like, I'm angry now and I'm telling you I'm your daughter and Harriet doesn't exist, and here comes the captain with a dildo on his face. Guess who I am? You know? And it's like in that moment, it's like I'm supposed to be angry, right? I thought Annabella was, and then I kept like, but do I engage with the captain? Do I find him funny? Like it's just like, how would this character really truly in her reality behave? And I'm like, that's the one scene that I would really like to take like at least a week to work with it, you know? So definitely take my time with the script and go over it and just try out as many options as possible.
I think that's a good way to do it. Josue, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to revise my statement. And actually, I do want to see it. Now that I think about it. Sorry, what'd you say, Shio?
That's allowed. That's allowed.
Yeah, because I remember I'm trying to think of which script it was for a play. I remember thinking like, my God, this script is such shit. It's such a bad like writing and all that stuff. And then when I watched it, I loved it. And I was like, oh, I didn't even think it could be played in this way. And
the power of acting.
Yeah, and I'm like, you know, thinking about it a little bit more and hearing everybody, it's more like Well, I can't really judge this play based on my performance. Like, I feel like I definitely, obviously, like a cold read, it's not, even close to being what the, peak is. Sigourney Weaver was in it. That's a high bar. She's an amazing actor.
Yeah.
So yeah, now that I'm thinking even more about it, I would like to see it kind of in hopes that I'm wrong about it, and to see what is it like when it's good, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. Anais.
Yeah, I feel like this kind of show, yes, like it depends on the actors and it really depends on I feel like as much as that, you need a competent freaking director for this show. Because in the wrong hands, this is crap. Like, just like not this. I don't know how to. I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but this is one of those things.
I would not want to see a high school do this. I would not want to see a high school do this.
No.
Oh no,
I
no,
feel
no,
like
no.
this is one of the places that, like, if it's not done in the right way, it's literally all over the place. Like, ain't nobody got time to type it all over the place.
Right, and also too, like oh, I had a point. It was right there.
Oh,
But
sorry.
the director, like all of the moving parts like need to be just so, and it's not just the actors. I mean, it's just everybody needs to bring their A game basically for this show in particular. So that's my take.
I think the way he wrote the note also kind of messes things up. Like, as I think as a performer reading some of the stuff, you might feel like, am I getting this wrong? Like, is this wrong all the time? Like, I could see being on stage and being like, oh, is this how he would want me to do it? So to Anais' point, I think you definitely need a good director. And this is one of those plays I would probably like workshop before I put it up. Even before we rehearsed, I would like try to gain a little bit more of an understanding of what's going on, or the
Agreed.
themes, and staying true to reality, to this reality, and what we're trying to do. And I think maybe the note puts a particular pressure on us, and we read the note, so that can also change it as an audience, like us thinking as audience members is like, he also was a little, I don't want to say arrogant, but a little bit arrogant, and like, this is how you play my stuff. And it already kind of puts you in a place of like, okay, well, let's see what this shit is about. And then you get to the end, and if it ain't for you, you're like, this is.
I think that's definitely fair. With anything like that, trying to compare your performances to someone
Right.
who's done it before makes it really difficult. And
you're like, Sigourney Weaver was in this shit?
Like, I was like, I gotta read the role that's going to read, like, the pressure.
Amanda, go ahead.
I just want to share, just because we keep referencing the note from the beginning, but Tyler, who couldn't make it tonight, texted me and he was like, I hope it goes well. Like, sorry, I can't make it, whatever. And then he was like, did you read the playwright's note before? If I hadn't read it, I might not have enjoyed it that much.
Oh.
So it's interesting, like, that take on it as well, like the pressure, whatever. And he's like, oh yes, I like this, like, clarity. This is what it's going for. So it's interesting, like, tomato, people have different things.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole your cup of tea. It's like, are you a Family Guy or a Simpsons kind of fan? Or are you gonna? Does the note help you enjoy the play, or does it confuse you or add pressure? Like, I think it's just it goes right back to the whole cup of tea. And the playwright's also saying, like, don't even overthink it. It's not that serious.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it, but
Seinfeld or Friends.
You should think about.
Right.
Josue, go ahead.
Neither.
Josue, get out.
Sorry. You are talking to a person with questionable taste, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm curious, kind of like out in the open with, not to dredge up the last time a similar point was made, but I do believe it was Almost Maine or whatever Love Island.
Lovesick.
I think it was the second thing.
Yeah,
Lovesick.
Lovesick, yes. Where the playwright was so hands-on, line by line on telling you exactly what to do, and it seemed like I was the only one that kind of took issue with it, and everybody else didn't. And
Later on.
here it seems more of a mixed bag, and I wonder why that's the case. For anybody who felt differently with Lovesick compared to Titanic, why is there that difference?
Andre, go ahead.
I think, at least for me, the difference was just how the note might have been written. For me, even the fact that he had needed to ask, like, did I confuse you? And it's like, well, yeah, a little bit, and then you read the piece and you're like, okay, I'm really confused. And I think having that pressure of your playwright being like, I didn't like how such and such played it, or I liked how this specific actor played it. And I know, at least in class, we always talk about, like, when we have a monologue or something, not going to see another actor do it. It almost makes you feel like I should go and watch this person do this performance so I get this right. And I felt like, to me, the note was, yes, it was clear, but also this is such an absurd play. It's so much nonsense in it that it might just be fun to look at people's interpretations of it. So to come back and be like, you're doing it wrong. It's worse than a line read to me. To say you're flat out absolutely wrong, you didn't hit it. It's worse than being like, try it this way, or find the balance in this, or here's the reality.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Amanda, go ahead, and then we'll dive into the next questions.
So I think two things about this. One, in the note he says, like, did I confuse you? Is he really asking, like, did I confuse you? Or is he being cheeky? Because he seems like a cheeky ass dude. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of that seems like, did I confuse you? LOL. Like, in parentheses, he makes a bunch of jokes throughout the entire note, like poking fun at himself, at other people and stuff. So I don't think he's sincerely asking or cares if he confused you. He's like, figure it out. Here's some like things. And I also think, as a creator, perhaps it's, well, for one thing, art, I think when we create it, part of the intent is that it will stay with people after it's done, be that the playwright passes on, or the performance is over and the audience leaves and carries whatever they experience with them, whatever feelings, good or bad, with them after the piece. And I think, as a creator, if you create, you have like your baby and you want to keep it how you want it, and like send it into the world, like, and he says, like, he would cast and like direct and everything, like this show in particular, and once it was out of his hands and someone else was doing it, he's like, you're doing it wrong, that's not how it's supposed to be. So the note is a way of letting his vision clearly, because he's not in the room to direct them the way he wrote it, or his intention, and explain it and workshop it with them. It's the way that anyone that picks up the play can do that performance. And I think the same goes for John Cariani with Almost Maine and Lovesick. It's very specific of, this is like the intent and how I want anyone that picks up this to be able, it's because I can't physically be at every production and workshop every time, to keep the integrity of my vision of my work that I created, because without the playwright, none of these things would even be happening. Like I obviously am an actor, as are all of you, I think, right? But it's like, like, I'm not a director, but also, like, none of us would have anything to do if it wasn't for the writers. So if they want to write a little note so that they keep their vision 100 years from now when someone picks up this play and is like, the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, then cool, do it. Thanks for the acting job. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm okay with whatever they want to tell me to do, I'll do. Like,
I think then you, again, I don't think it's a problem with the note. I think just the style and how the note is written. You could, to Ethan's point, I think if you needed to say all that, then maybe you didn't do the greatest job.